A problem I've never seen a solution for with woodworking is the claustrophobic state we get into when it's time to clamp things up. At that point, clamps are so close together that putting any pressure on the clamp is virtually impossible. Today, I'm reaching into my patent ready bag and pulling out an obvious solution to this close quarters nightmare. And stick around to the end as I have a few extra details for you. Before I mention why I've decided not to add handles on these, and really the reason why I chose to make wooden clamps in the first place, and before we destroy both these clamps to see how strong they are, let me show you how you can build your own. I'm not going to go into a long thesis on cutting patterns and attaching them to wood, but will mention that I have both a plywood pattern as well as a hardwood pattern that I've created that are both available for free in the description. All holes and notches are marked in the pattern, making it easy to assemble these. Essentially, we have three parts that make up both arms. Two sides that will sandwich a third piece that butts up against the clamp bar. The top arm will of course be static like any other F-clamp. The bottom hinges and allows you to position it as close to the workpiece as you want before you use the clamp. Whichever pattern you choose to use, you'll want to make sure every part has glue on it. While I know a lot of people like to leave the salt at the dinner table, I use a few grains of salt on every part to add friction so that the wood doesn't slide as it's clamped. The one confusing part of the pattern is the bar, but only because I wanted to keep it simple for printers. Once you cut one part and glue it, line up the second next to the first. Rocket science, I know. I made the plywood pattern bandsaw and drill friendly, meaning you'll only need those two power tools to create a nice clamp. It's incredibly simple to cut these spaces out, and I really see no problem in doubling or even tripling up plywood to do multiples. The only thing you need to worry about when you're done is that a 5/16 inch bolt will fit each slot you cut out. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's quickly assemble these clamps. The static arm at the top will go together with the first half of the arm down and the bar to the side. Next, we'll attach our middle arm. It's critically important that there's no gap here. So important that you might decide to clamp just these two parts together before adding the back side of the arm. This is how it'll look when you're done. You'll notice something a little different about the center section of the bottom jaw. While it is the same length as the top, the piece will need to be cut down both lines. We'll set aside the smaller of the two pieces for now. The hinging bottom jaw is pretty much built like the top jaw. We'll add some glue to both sides of the middle, season with a few grains of salt, and set them together. Two important things you need to pay attention to here. First, make sure you add a 5/16 inch bolt through both holes. And second, make sure that the bar that you're placing inside pivots so that you can slide the bar. Now we'll add the inner nut so that we can tighten the jaw. I've marked on both printouts the notch you'll need to cut out, but I'm assuming you have the same size 5/16 inch square nut that I have. Line up the 5/16 inch square nut of yours to the paper just to be sure, and then cut that section out of the completed arm on the bandsaw. This is what it'll look like. The nut will fit partially inside of the middle arm up to the threading. Have you figured it out already? That's right. That little stubby end piece is going to fit inside the end, but not before we notch it out enough that the nut will slide into it. I extended a mechanical pencil to mark the notch before cutting it out on the bandsaw. Oh, like a glove. It's also important that we cut some wings to fit in it, giving the entire region more strength. Now, if you didn't see the epoxy coming, you must be new to the channel. Hit the subscribe button below, it's free. We'll add epoxy to the front and back of the nut as well as to the stubby section. If you have leftover epoxy, you can use it to glue in the wings or use wood glue. As far as building the clamp goes, that's it. The only thing left to do is to grab a 5/16 inch bolt that's 4 inches long, as well as a rubber foot stopper for a chair from the local department store, a couple washers, and a few 5/16 inch nuts. I'm going to quickly show how that's assembled now. We'll twist the bolt through the arm and jam the nuts on the bolt, lining the nuts up enough that we can get a 1/2 inch deep well socket on it. The hardwood clamp had to be constructed a little bit differently. Because plywood is engineered and incredibly strong on the edges and hardwood bends, I had to make some changes. First, I had to angle the arms inward for spring back compensation. This allows me to clamp down without buckling the wood outward. This redesign added a few weeks onto this project, but I think it's worth it. The second thing I had to do was increase the width of the bar for strength. To do this, I decreased the amount I cut out of the back and used splines with the grain pointing outward to act as stops for my bottom clamp. Now, because we make things on this channel as much as we can, I wanted to build my own clamp pads instead of buying rubber feet. To do this, it was simple to make a two-part system by using 2 sections of hardwood and 2 Forstner bits to drill and then glue the pads. Finally, I know glue is said to be as strong or stronger than wood, but I wanted to physically connect all 3 layers together. Using dowels does that, although I'm still not entirely sure if it matters much at all. Anyway, the complete video of that build is in the description. If you're interested in building either of these clamps, I definitely use it as a reference as well as this one. Now, to why I made these clamps handleless, or maybe you know. Pause the video now and leave me a comment below. First, let's go back to the example I gave at the beginning of this video. I know it looks like I'm exaggerating here, but this is a common problem for me when I do glue-ups. As you may know, the first time you set a clamp on and tighten it, it'll need to be tightened again as you place more clamps on. The problem, of course, at the end is that tightening those become an impossible chore that sometimes results in removing and then reapplying clamps. To avoid that mess, with my clamps, we can simply finger tighten all of our clamps first. We can go back later and use a crank to tighten them all, resulting in even pressure over the entire project. But it's not an either-or decision to use these clamps. Regular clamps can be used in conjunction with these clamps spaced out. We can tighten them as much as we need to before sliding these handleless clamps on and finishing it up. The crank I made here can be seen on my second channel, but just because I made this fancy pants crank, it doesn't mean you have to make one as well. A regular 3/8 inch socket wrench with a 1/2 inch deep well socket, which you probably have lying around the shop, will work just fine. And now on to the main event. I used a hanging scale here attached to my ceiling. My opinion is that you'll probably never use more than about 100 pounds of clamping on any project. And if you do, you'll probably damage the workpiece you're working on. On the hardwood, I'm going to call it at about 190 pounds. The biggest problem I found with the clamp was that it twisted due to the S hooks. Could I do more? Maybe 200 pounds. What really surprised me here was the strength of the plywood clamp. Due to the twisting issues I just mentioned, I had a terrible time with the plywood. I think it could have easily have gone up to 225 pounds, but it was ridiculously difficult to keep it from bending. Of the two, I definitely think plywood is the way to go, as I wasn't able to actually break the bar. I have 3 clamps I'd like to give away. If you're interested in owning a clamp, let me know in the comments. For a second and third chance to enter to own one, watch and comment in my crank video as well as the hardwood build video located at the end of this video and in the description. In the next couple of weeks, I'll have a video with the results on my second channel, so be sure to subscribe there to get the results. Since I give away my plans and patterns, I've started up a Patreon page. If you'd like to see some benefits like free giveaways that come with that, follow my Patreon link. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe, ring the bell, and I thank you so much for being a part of my shop. Please leave a comment below, come find me on Instagram at MakeThingsWithRob, and remember to keep making things.